Have you ever wondered if the secrets of the past can truly be buried forever? Can a lie, built with the best intentions, withstand the brutal truth? In the small, seemingly peaceful town of Oakhaven, the answer was revealed in a heartbreaking tragedy. It showed us that even the best-laid plans can become a double-edged sword, tearing a community apart. Oakhaven was the kind of place where you could easily imagine pickup trucks parked on front lawns, the sound of church bells on a Sunday morning, and lively barbecues on Thanksgiving. The people there lived simple lives, bound together by generations of shared history on the same piece of land. Our story, however, doesn't begin with a grand event, but with a humble project. It was founded by Eleanor Vance, a retired history teacher. In her 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a perpetually kind gaze, she had a passion for connecting people. She believed that family history was the strongest invisible thread that bound a community. With this passion, she started the Oakhaven Family DNA Project. Its goal was simple: use modern DNA testing to help people discover their ancestry, find long-lost relatives, and create a single massive family tree for the entire town. Initially, the project was a resounding success. Nearly everyone, from the oldest families to the newest arrivals, eagerly participated. They submitted their saliva samples, anxiously awaited the results, and then rejoiced when a woman found a long-lost cousin she never knew, or a young boy learned about his great-grandfather who fought in World War I. Joy and a newfound sense of connection spread through Oakhaven. Eleanor believed she was building something magnificent, a legacy of love and unity. She had no idea that those small boxes containing DNA samples were like Pandora's boxes, waiting to be opened to unleash the ghosts of the past. Among the first to join the project were David and Sarah Miller, a couple admired by the entire town. David, a tall, strong-handed carpenter with a warm smile, was the perfect picture of a family man. His wife, Sarah, was petite and graceful, with golden blonde hair and a clear-eyed gaze. Their love story was a living fairy tale, starting in high school and lasting for 3 decades. They had 2 grown children, and their life seemed to be a perfect blend of love, trust, and happiness. They submitted their DNA samples out of simple curiosity, wanting to see if they were connected to any of the neighbors they had lived beside for decades. They waited for the results with simple excitement. But instead of a congratulatory email, they received a call from Eleanor, her voice trembling slightly. She wanted them to come to her house to discuss a small anomaly. When David and Sarah walked into Eleanor's cozy home, the air felt heavy. Eleanor held a sheet of paper with a complex family tree printed on it. She pointed to a name. It was Robert Miller, David's father, who had passed away years ago. But the strange thing was, on the chart was another name, a stranger, and the DNA results showed that David had a very close blood relationship with this man. Then Eleanor pointed to another spot on the chart. This time it was Sarah's name. And again, the results showed that Sarah also had a close blood relationship with the man David was related to. It was impossible. "Is this a mistake, Eleanor?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. Eleanor shook her head. "I double-checked, Sarah. There are no mistakes." She explained that the results indicated David and Sarah were very closely related, perhaps cousins. But then an even more horrifying truth emerged. Eleanor pointed to Robert Miller's name, David's father, and Sarah's name. The DNA results showed that Robert Miller had a very close blood relationship with Sarah, close enough to be father and daughter. David, Sarah, and Eleanor were all plunged into a deadly silence. What did this mean? David and Sarah were husband and wife, but now they might be cousins. And if David's father was also Sarah's father, that was a truth too monstrous to accept. Their lives, their love, everything they had built over 30 years, suddenly became a terrifying drama, a play in which they had unknowingly been the main actors. This was just the beginning. Soon, other dark secrets, buried under Oakhaven's peaceful facade, would also begin to unravel, one by one. The night after their meeting with Eleanor, David and Sarah returned home in a suffocating silence. The air in their house, once filled with laughter and warmth, was now cold and heavy. Dinner was served, but neither of them could eat. Every glance, Every gentle touch was now loaded with fear and suspicion. They were husband and wife, parents to 2 children. But now they looked at each other through the eyes of strangers, searching for an answer to a mystery too big to comprehend. In the darkest hours of that sleepless night, when the rest of the town was in a peaceful slumber, David decided to find answers. He went up to the attic where old family mementos were stored. Dust-covered boxes, each one a story in itself, filled the space. Finally, he found a small box with a faded old photograph inside. It showed his father, Robert Miller, standing next to a young, beautiful woman with long golden hair and a radiant smile. The woman was not David's mother. Robert was holding a baby in his arms. David was stunned. The woman's face in the photo was identical to Sarah's, like a younger version of his wife. David's heart stopped. He turned to see Sarah standing silently in the attic doorway, her eyes filled with horror. She had seen the photograph. In that moment, all the doubts and fears became a raw, brutal truth. The woman in the photo was Sarah's mother. The woman Sarah had always been told died shortly after she was born. The stories they had been told, that Robert Miller married Evelyn, David's mother, and that Sarah was the child of another couple, were all a lie. This single photograph told a different story. Robert Miller had a relationship with Sarah's mother before he married Evelyn. Their search continued, and they eventually found an old diary belonging to David's mother, Evelyn. The yellowed pages were filled with pain, resentment, and a devastating secret. Evelyn had written about another woman in her husband's life, a woman who had a daughter with Robert but died in childbirth. The baby girl was sent away to another family. But Evelyn always knew that the baby was adopted right there in Oakhaven. She had lived in fear, worrying that one day, the truth would be exposed. David and Sarah looked at each other, tears streaming down Sarah's face. Their lives, everything they had ever believed, were a lie. They weren't cousins. They were half-siblings. Their marriage, their 3 decades together, their children, were all built on a horrifying foundation. It was a Greek tragedy, unfolding in the heart of small-town America. This story, of course, could not be contained. Sarah, in her confusion and heartbreak, called Eleanor. She told Eleanor everything. Eleanor was shocked. She did what she thought was best. She went to the families who raised David and Sarah, the people she thought deserved to know the truth. And from there, the real storm began. Rumors spread like wildfire. The story jumped from one family to another. People started to re-examine their own DNA results. A neighbor of David and Sarah's, a woman named Linda who had always been proud of her long family lineage, discovered that her DNA results showed a close relationship with another family in town, a family she had always looked down upon. She demanded that Eleanor recheck, believing there was a mistake. But there was no mistake. Linda discovered that her grandfather, a respected man who founded a successful business in town, had an illegitimate child with a poor woman, and that child was the grandfather of the family she had always disdained. The truth was out, and other family secrets began to spill. One man discovered that the son he had raised and loved for 20 years was not his biological child. A woman found out she was not the only one to carry the bloodline of the father she revered. The Oakhaven Family DNA Project, which was created to connect people, was now tearing everything apart. The walls of deception had crumbled, and beneath them lay the wreckage of relationships, beliefs, and lies. After the secret of David and Sarah Miller was exposed, Oakhaven was no longer the town everyone knew. The air became heavy and tense. Suspicious glances, hushed whispers, and a deafening silence had replaced the friendly smiles and greetings. People began to re-examine every relationship, every story they had heard, and every person they had trusted. Eleanor Vance, the project's founder, became a public enemy. Some blamed her for disrupting their lives. They argued that she had no right to dig up long-buried secrets. Others saw her as a savior, a person who helped them find the truth, no matter how painful it was. But to Eleanor, she felt like a lonely woman trapped among the fragments of a town she once loved. She tried, again and again, to explain that she had no ill intentions, but no one wanted to listen. They just wanted someone to blame for the chaos and heartbreak they were experiencing. The situation worsened as other families began to publicly reveal their secrets. A wealthy family, the Petersons, had always been proud of their pure bloodline and fortune. The Peterson grandfather, a former mayor of Oakhaven, was always seen as a symbol of integrity and success. But when their DNA results were published, a horrifying truth was revealed. It turned out that a woman in the family had an affair with a household servant from a distant country, and their child, who was raised as a Peterson, grew up and married someone else in town. The servant's blood, the blood the Petersons always considered impure, flowed through the veins of the people they considered their own children. And it wasn't just secrets about illicit relationships, but also about substitutions. One woman, who had raised a son for 30 years, discovered that the boy she had loved, nurtured, and sacrificed everything for was not her biological child. The DNA results showed that he was the child of another couple in town, a couple who had died in a car accident years ago. It turned out that during a stormy night at the town hospital, the two babies were switched. And a nurse, terrified of her mistake, decided to keep the secret instead of telling the truth. She did it to protect herself, but in the process, she unknowingly destroyed the lives of two families. These stories, each a tragedy in its own right, had one thing in common. They were all secrets that had been buried for so long, secrets that people thought would never be exposed. But DNA technology, a technology created to connect people, became a tool to destroy everything. It became a double-edged sword. On one hand, it allowed people to discover their origins, but on the other, it shattered the beliefs and relationships that were built on a foundation of lies. Life in Oakhaven became unbearable. Divorces were filed. Relationships were severed. Families were torn apart. The town's residents, who had lived in a false harmony, were now torn apart by the truth. They couldn't look each other in the eye anymore. They couldn't smile at each other anymore. They couldn't trust each other anymore. Everyone blamed each other, Eleanor and themselves. Oakhaven, a peaceful small town, had become a battlefield where secrets and lies became deadly weapons. After the devastating truth about David and Sarah Miller was exposed, no one in Oakhaven felt safe anymore. The storm of truth had swept through the town, leaving behind a wreckage of broken relationships. David and Sarah, once the epitome of eternal love, decided to get a divorce. Though they still loved each other, the fact that they were half-siblings and that their children were born from that relationship was a burden too heavy to bear. It was a truth they couldn't live with. Their love was cursed. Eleanor, who had initiated the DNA project, eventually left Oakhaven. She couldn't endure the hateful looks, the accusations, and the cold stares from people who were once her friends and neighbors. The project she had created with a good heart had become a tool of destruction. She tried to explain that she wasn't the one who created the lies, but just the one who accidentally exposed them. But no one listened. She left, carrying a broken heart and a heavy burden of regret. The story of Oakhaven is a tragic tale about the consequences of truth. It shows us that sometimes the truth doesn't set us free. Sometimes it's a burden. It's a costly lesson that family secrets, buried under a thin layer of deceit, can become a destructive force, shattering everything. Those secrets can hold a town together, and when they are revealed, they can tear it to pieces. So, is there a happy ending to the story? Is there something to be learned from the tragedy of Oakhaven? Perhaps the lesson here isn't about whether to seek the truth or not. It's about how we face it. David and Sarah, though separated, remained friends. They still loved their children, and they faced the truth together. They decided that no matter how painful the truth was, they would face it rather than continue living a lie. They chose the truth even though the price was immense. And maybe, in some way, Oakhaven found a form of peace. Not the false peace of lies, but the true peace of a town that has faced its wounds. Some families reconciled. Some people found long-lost relatives. The wounds are still there, but they have begun the healing process. Oakhaven, once torn apart, is now beginning to rebuild, one piece at a time. This story, the story of the Oakhaven Family DNA Project, is a reminder for all of us. It reminds us that technology, no matter how advanced, cannot replace empathy, compassion, and honesty. And it's also a reminder that sometimes the secrets we keep to protect others are the very things that cause the most pain. The truth, no matter how painful, is always better than a beautiful lie. And you, have you ever wondered about your origins? Are you willing to face the truth, even if it could change everything you've ever believed? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story compelling, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next gripping tale. We'll be back with a new story, a new secret, and a different tragedy. See you next time.